The world fractured, not with a gentle fade, but with the searing pain of 1,000 needles lancing through my skull. My eyes snapped open, fighting the glue of unconsciousness, only to be met by a kaleidoscope of flashing red lights. A high-pitched, insistent beeping drilled into my eardrums, each pulse a hammer blow against my temples. I was strapped down, thick restraints biting into wrists and ankles, the cold, metallic hum of a surgical theater echoing around me. Except this wasn't a theater. It was a cage, a sterile, obsidian room, walls slick with what looked suspiciously like dried blood. A digital timer above me, etched in angry crimson, flashed. 58 seconds. 58 seconds. For what? My breath hitched. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed its way up my throat. Then I saw her, reflected in the polished floor, a woman in a pristine lab coat, her face obscured by a surgical mask, but her eyes, they burned with an unsettling calm. In her gloved hand, a syringe, its needle glinting under the harsh lights, filled with a viscous, dark fluid. She didn't speak, didn't move, just watched the timer, her posture radiating an unnerving blend of patience and intent. The beeping quickened. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to escape. My mind was a blank slate, no memory of how I got here, who I was, or why this woman was preparing to inject me with death itself. All I knew was the primal terror, the desperate need to break free. The restraints creaked as I strained, muscles screaming, the cold metal digging deeper. The timer clicked again. 45 seconds. Every instinct screamed run. But where? And from what? This wasn't just a threat. It was an execution. And I was the unwilling subject, waking up just in time to feel the blade. In the sterile silence of her sanctuary, Alara existed as a ghost, a shadow of her former self, carefully constructed from anonymity and routine. The only heartbeat in the room was the low hum of the antiquated server humming in a dust-laden corner, a relic she'd long forgotten. Then, a sharp, almost imperceptible chime cut through the quiet, vibrating not through the air, but through her very bones. The screen of an old, decommissioned comms device, tucked away for years, flickered to life, displaying a cascade of encrypted symbols. Her breath hitched. A phantom coldness traced its way down her spine. The world she'd painstakingly built, brick by fragile brick, was suddenly brittle, threatening to shatter. This wasn't just a message. It was a ghost from a past she had buried alive. A stark, digital harbinger of absolute dread. The world exploded. A concussive force ripped through Alara's apartment. A symphony of splintering wood, shattering glass, and twisted metal. Instinct, honed by years of living on the knife's edge, took over instantly. Before the dust could settle, she was moving, a blur of practiced precision amidst the chaos. An old bookshelf, heavy with forgotten volumes, became a desperate shield against a second wave of shrapnel. She tasted concrete dust and fear, her heart hammering against her ribs, but her movements were fluid, relentless. Every near miss, every searing heat from a collapsing wall, fueled her desperate scramble. She was not just escaping. She was fighting, clawing her way through fire and debris, the primal urge to survive blazing fiercely in her eyes. Across town, Kai stared at the cracked screen of his phone, the flickering light illuminating the lines of exhaustion and guilt etched into his face. His days were a monotonous rhythm of self-imposed penance, haunted by the ghosts of their past. A new message, from an unknown number, vibrated the cheap plastic. He almost dismissed it, another spam call from the world he'd tried to forget. But then, a distorted voice crackled through, a desperate, fragmented whisper. Static warred with syllables, yet the recognition was instant, a gut punch that stole his breath. It was Alara. Her voice, even broken and desperate, bypassed his defenses, shattering the fragile peace he'd built. The past wasn't just haunting him. It was calling him back, demanding atonement. Alara sprinted through the labyrinthine alleyways, each breath a raw, burning protest in her lungs. The city's pulse throbbed around her, sirens wailing, distant shouts. the frantic rhythm of her own pounding heart. A flickering neon sign, advertising an obscure dive bar, cast a garish red glow on her desperate escape. The pulsing light, however, was a trigger, not just a distraction. Suddenly, the grimy alley dissolved, replaced by a vivid, searing memory. Kai's intense gaze under a similar neon haze, his hand brushing hers, a silent, electric moment suspended in time during a mission gone sideways. The recollection was a cruel ache, a potent blend of tenderness and regret, momentarily slowing her frantic pace before the present danger snapped her back to the grim reality. Following the cryptic coordinates, Alara navigated the crumbling urban landscape to a forgotten landmark, an abandoned theater, its grand facade scarred by time and neglect. Dust motes danced in the sparse beams of light filtering through broken windows, illuminating a scene of decaying opulence. The air was thick with the scent of damp, mildew, and an oppressive silence that screamed, trap. Her senses were hyper-alert. Every creak of the decaying floorboards, every rustle of unseen debris, amplified into a potential threat. She moved with predatory grace, her hand instinctively hovering near the concealed blade, wary of the shadows that clung to every corner. This was more than a meeting. It was a descent into a forgotten world, a place where ghosts might very well still reside. A whisper of movement, a subtle shift in the oppressive shadows, and then he was there. Kai, emerging from the depths of the theater, a specter of their shared past. Their eyes met across the vast, decaying space, an instant, electric connection that spanned years of unspoken words, raw emotion, and deep-seated pain. Relief warred with a bitter resentment, suspicion with a primal need for connection. Every line on his face, every hardened edge to her stance, told a story of sacrifice and betrayal. The silence between them was not empty, but heavy, laden with the weight of almost something, of promises broken and futures denied. Their reunion wasn't a comfort. It was a clash of titans, each mirroring the other's guarded fury. The fragile truce shattered instantly as information bled into the silence. Project Nightingale, Kai rasped, the name a chilling whisper, bringing with it a wave of cold dread. It was a ghost from their most dangerous operation, a buried secret that was now brutally unearthed. The realization that their past had not only caught up but was actively hunting them down sparked an immediate, furious argument. Accusations flew, fueled by adrenaline and years of repressed blame. Every sharp word was a barb, cutting deeper than any physical blow. The air crackled with their shared history, their individual guilt, and the terrifying prospect that the very thing they tried to escape was now coming for their heads, forcing them to confront not only the enemy but each other. Just as their argument reached a fever pitch, a shrill, digital alarm sliced through the decaying silence of the theater. Not a sound from the outside, but a piercing, insistent alert from their hidden comms devices, vibrating against their skin. A crimson light pulsed frantically on their wrist-mounted screens, mirroring the sudden, cold dread in their eyes. Their location was compromised. All arguments vanished, replaced by a terrifying, synchronized clarity. There was no time for explanations, no room for recriminations. They moved as one, their bodies snapping into trained action, instincts honed by years of desperate escapes. The theater, once a potential sanctuary, was now a death trap. They had seconds to disappear, to outrun the phantom hunters closing in. The crumbling theater wasn't just a relic. It was a death trap. Every step on the rusted fire escape groaned a protest, every handhold a gamble. Against gravity, dust and plaster rained down as Alara scrambled upwards, her breath ragged, Kai's shadow just behind her, covering her climb. Below, the relentless rhythmic thump of approaching boots echoed through the hollow structure, their pursuers a relentless wave. A shot cracked, splintering concrete near Alara's head, the sound amplified in the claustrophobic space. They moved with a desperate, almost primal coordination, years of unspoken trust guiding their hands, their eyes, their synchronized descent. The wind whipped at their clothes as they burst onto the main roof. The city lights a dizzying panorama, but there was no time for awe. Only the desperate need for higher ground, another fleeting moment of evasion. Then a horrifying lurch. The worn-out edge of the roof gave way beneath Alara's boot, sending a cascade of loose gravel into the abyss below. Her scream was cut short as she plunged, fingers scrabbling uselessly, the city lights swirling into a terrifying blur. For a heart-stopping second, she was falling, truly falling. But then, a jolt, a searing pain in her wrist as Kai's hand locked around hers, his grip like iron. Her body swung, slamming against the brickwork, the wind knocked from her lungs. Their eyes met across the perilous gap, a silent conversation of terror and desperate relief, mirroring a lifetime ago. Another precipice, another moment he'd pulled her back from the brink. The weight of their shared past, their intertwined fates, hung heavy in the air, just as she did, suspended between life and oblivion. No time to linger. They scrambled across a treacherous network of rooftops, leaping gaps, sliding down corrugated metal, their pursuers still a relentless force below. The cityscape became their intricate, deadly playground. With a final desperate slide, they dropped into the cavernous concrete belly of a multi-story parking garage, the screech of tires echoing around them. A rusty sedan sat forlornly in a shadowed corner. Kai, with practiced efficiency, ripped open the dashboard, wires sparking, hot wiring the ancient engine to life as Alara scanned their entry point, her hand already on the door handle. The engine roared, a guttural promise of escape. Tires squealed, smoke billowing as the car fishtailed out of the parking space, narrowly missing a black van that careened into their path, accelerating into the blinding city night. The city lights blurred into streaks as Kai pushed the stolen sedan through the neon-soaked streets, a ghost in the urban sprawl. Beside him, Alara, despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, was already at work. She pulled up the initial cryptic alert on a burner phone, her fingers dancing across the screen, not just reading, but dissecting, seeing beyond the surface. Lines of seemingly innocuous code, a discarded string of characters, a rhythmic pause in the transmission. She found it, a hidden geotag, obscured by layers of digital noise, resolving into coordinates. And then, a coded phrase, a series of seemingly random words that made both their heads snap up in unison. Asterisk Nightingale's song, Dawn's Whisper. Asterisk the recognition was instant, visceral. A forgotten name, a shared past, now resurfacing with chilling urgency, pulling them towards an unknown, dangerous destination. The sterile glow of a classified briefing room replaced the chaos of the present. Younger Alara and Kai, sharp, idealistic, sat opposite each other, uniforms crisp, eyes bright with ambition. An older, stern-faced operative pointed to a holographic projection of a sprawling, digitized network. Project Nightingale. His voice resonated *, our most critical intelligence retrieval operation. A ghost in the machine, targeting a network believed to hold the key to global destabilization. * their faces, then, were filled with a shared sense of purpose, a naive belief in the clarity of their mission, the righteousness of their cause. The weight of the world on their young shoulders, ready to accept the burden, oblivious to the deeper machinations already at play. The seeds of betrayal silently sown beneath the surface of their most important assignment. The coordinates led them not to a sleek, modern facility, but to a forgotten concrete monolith on the city's outskirts. Inside, it was a labyrinth of dust and shadows, a safe house time had forgotten, choked with disused equipment and yellowing intel files. Empty corridors stretched into darkness, each turn a potential dead end, each room a mausoleum of secrets. The air hung thick with the metallic scent of decay and stale paper, pressing down on them. They moved with a cautious tension, their flashlights cutting swathes through the gloom, revealing cryptic notes tacked to bulletin boards, disconnected server racks, ghosts of past operations. This wasn't a refuge. It was an archaeological dig into their own fractured history, each step deepening the sense of unease, pulling them closer to the buried truths they both desperately sought and secretly feared. Deep within the labyrinth, hidden behind a false panel, they found it. A single encrypted file, distinct from the others. Alara's fingers flew across her device, decrypting it in a flurry of code. The revelation hit them like a physical blow. Project Nightingale was a decoy. Its true purpose, to expose a mole within our ranks. The words hung in the air, a devastating accusation, shattering their fragile truce. Suspicion, sharp and icy, rekindled between them, turning their faces into hardened masks. Kai slammed his fist against a metal cabinet, the clang echoing the shock and rage that ripped through him. "One of us was the bait," Alara whispered, her voice laced with betrayal, her eyes narrowing on him, the question of who suddenly, terribly, hanging unspoken, yet screaming between them. The accusation hung heavy, suffocating. Alara stepped closer, her voice low, trembling with a raw edge. Nightingale, when the extraction went south. You made a choice, Kai. You left me out there longer than you should have. The words weren't a question, but a wound, torn open anew. Kai flinched, his own guilt a visible burden on his face, eyes falling from hers. I had orders, Alara. I had to secure the asset. She cut him off, a choked sound escaping her lips. No. You always had a choice. Her pain was palpable, years of resentment and unanswered questions pouring out. For a fleeting second, her gaze dropped to his lips, a different kind of confession hovering on the edge of her tongue, a deeper feeling almost escaping, before the harsh reality of their situation, of his past decision. Slammed it back down, leaving only the bitter taste of what might have been, now tainted by suspicion and the relentless pursuit of their past. The illusion of safety shattered with the force of a thunderclap. One moment hushed vigilance. The next, the world exploded. Alarms shrieked, a metallic scream tearing through the air, followed by the concussive boom of breaching charges. The reinforced walls buckled, showering them with plaster and sparks as a specialized team, ghost-like in their efficiency, tore through their last line of defense. There was no negotiation, no warning, only a coordinated, brutal assault. Alara moved on instinct, pushing Kai down as another blast tore through the corridor, the stench of ozone and cordite instantly filling their lungs. This wasn't a raid. It was an execution, meticulously planned, ruthlessly executed. Their sanctuary was a death trap, and the only way out was straight through the fire. Every inch of the collapsing safe house became a weapon, every shadow a fleeting ally. Smoke, thick and choking, blurred the lines between friend and foe, turning the familiar layout into a labyrinth of falling debris and unseen threats. They moved as one, a dance of practiced evasion honed in darker, forgotten corners of their past. Alara, a blur of calculated movements, through an overturned desk to block a doorway, the heavy thud barely audible over the crackle of flames. Kai, improvising with agency-level precision, rerouted power conduits, sparking a violent cascade of overloads that bought them precious seconds. The building groaned, a dying beast, threatening to swallow them whole, but their survival instinct, sharp and unforgiving, urged them forward, deeper into the inferno, towards an unknown exit. Amidst the chaos, a desperate objective. Before the safe house could fully surrender to the inferno, Kai lunged for the hidden server, a nondescript panel concealed behind a faulty wall vent. His fingers, a blur of practiced motion, tore open the casing, revealing the delicate circuitry within. The air around him shimmered with heat, the structural groans of the building growing louder, more insistent. He was racing against time, against the encroaching fire, against the very destruction of their sanctuary. A glowing data chip, small but infinitely valuable, was the target. He didn't know what it contained, only that Alara had marked it as critical. As the last connection severed, the building screamed its final protest, unknowingly yielding the first thread of a conspiracy that would unravel everything. The roar of a stolen engine was their only companion as they burst onto the arterial highways, trading the contained inferno for the asphalt jungle. Tires screamed, a symphony of desperate speed, as they wove through late-night traffic, the cityscape a blur of neon and concrete. Pursuing vehicles, relentless and numerous, closed in from all angles, their headlights like predatory eyes in the rearview mirror. Alara, at the wheel, pushed the limits of physics and sanity, every swerve, every near-miss a testament to her honed reflexes. Kai, leaning over the console, fed her real-time intel, his voice a steady counterpoint to the escalating chaos. The city became a weapon, a gauntlet of accelerating danger, each intersection a gamble, each tunnel an ambush, propelling them deeper into the desperate unknown. The memory flared, a ghost from their past. Not a fire, but the cold, sterile light of the Nightingale Command Center. Alara, younger, but already burdened by a weighty resolve, stood before a holographic display, a network of intersecting red lines representing lives, futures. A choice, morally ambiguous and brutally efficient, was laid bare. One path saved thousands, but condemned a handful of innocents. The other, ethical purity, risked catastrophic global fallout. Kai watched, unseen in the shadows of the mission room, the conflict etching lines onto his own face. He saw the flicker of hesitation in her eyes, the invisible tremor in her hand as she made the call, sending ripples through their shared future. It was a choice born of necessity, but one that would forever define the shadows they now fled. Huddled in the grimy privacy of a forgotten motel room, the digital lifeline crackled to life. A distorted voice, familiar yet unsettling, emerged from the speaker, Echo, their former handler, a phantom from their past. The figure on the pixelated screen was a blur of shadows and sharp angles, reflecting the insidious nature of his intel. He spoke of rot, of a cancer festering within the very core of their old agency, a conspiracy so deep it made Nightingale look like child's play. His warnings were stark, his tone urgent. They were pawns in a game far larger and more dangerous than they could imagine, and the entity that hunted them was merely a symptom of a deeper, more pervasive evil. The world they knew, the one they thought they'd escaped, was a carefully constructed lie. The motel room transformed into a war room, littered with schematics and Kai's meticulously extracted data fragment now laid bare. Echo's fragmented intel, combined with Kai's encrypted files, began to paint a terrifying picture. A secure agency facility, the heart of the conspiracy, housing the true mastermind. They worked in a feverish synergy, Alara's tactical brilliance meshing with Kai's analytical prowess. A daring infiltration plan began to coalesce, a complex ballet of misdirection, electronic warfare, and precision strikes. Every entry point, every camera, every guard rotation was dissected, mapped, and exploited. The risk was monumental, the odds stacked against them, but the path forward, however perilous, was finally clear. The hunter would become the hunted. The eve of the mission was thick with a silence heavier than any storm. All plans were laid, all contingencies considered. Now only the waiting remained. They stood together, not touching, yet acutely aware of the space between them. The hum of the city outside was a distant, indifferent whisper. A shared glance, deep and knowing, spoke volumes beyond words, acknowledging the extreme danger, the finality this mission might bring. For a fleeting moment, the weight of their unspoken past, the almost something they were, surfaced, raw and vulnerable, adding a new layer of immense emotional weight to the risk they were about to take. It was a silent promise, a silent farewell, before they stepped back into the fire, together, for the very last time. Under the merciless gaze of a moonless sky, they moved as one, a whisper against the industrial hum of a world unaware. This was it, the perimeter of the Leviathan. Every wire, every camera, every laser grid had been studied, memorized, internalized. Alara, a ghost in her own right, scaled the reinforced wall with impossible grace, each finger finding purchase, each breath a silent prayer. Below, Kai, vigilant and focused, deftly bypassed the ground sensors, his hands moving with surgical precision across glowing panels. Their movements were a meticulously choreographed ballet of infiltration, a testament to years of shared training, of trust forged in fire. This wasn't just about breaking in. It was about reclaiming a past, about piercing the veil of deceit that had shattered their lives. The cold steel of the facility hummed with unknown secrets, and they were here to rip them bare. Deeper within the labyrinthine heart of the facility, the air thrummed with a low electronic pulse. This was the nerve center, a gauntlet of digital eyes and unseen tripwires. Laser grids crisscrossed corridors in hypnotic, lethal patterns, motion sensors hummed with an almost predatory awareness, and patrol routes demanded split-second timing. Alara moved through them with liquid precision, her body contorting, twisting, and sliding inches from infrared beams that could instantly trigger alarms. Kai, always a step behind or a step ahead, anticipated her every move, his fingers dancing across hidden conduits, rerouting power, creating infinitesimal windows of opportunity. Their communication was a silent symphony of knowing glances, subtle hand signals, and the profound, unspoken trust that bound them. Each successful bypass was a breath held, a victory claimed, pushing them closer to the horrifying truth waiting at the core. The pressure was a physical weight pressing in from all sides. The data core pulsed with an eerie, cerulean glow, a digital heart hidden beneath layers of steel and deception. As the final access panel hissed open, revealing a cavernous server room, the true horror began to unfold. Kai, his hands trembling slightly, interfaced their encrypted drive, and Project Nightingale spilled forth across holographic screens like a malignant growth. It wasn't just data. It was a blueprint for control, a chilling expose of an insidious agency conspiracy stretching far beyond their wildest fears. Experiments, manipulations, assassinations, all cloaked under the guise of national security. Alara watched, a knot of icy dread coiling in her stomach, the magnitude of the betrayal sinking in, connecting every fractured piece of their past. The truth was not just horrifying. It was a living, breathing monster, one they had unknowingly been part of, and now, the weight of its revelation threatened to crush them. Then, a torrent of fragmented memories, sharper, clearer than ever before, assaulted them both. The images coalesced into a devastating flashback, revealing the antagonist, their once trusted superior, now a phantom of malice. He hadn't just observed, he had orchestrated. Every strained glance between Alara and Kai, every stolen moment of connection, every flicker of their undeniable romantic tension during that fateful mission. He'd exploited it. A deliberate, calculated sabotage designed to create a controlled failure, a scapegoat. Their bond, their vulnerability, became the very weapon turned against them, allowing him to seize control, to ascend to power amidst the engineered chaos. The heartbreak of their mission's demise, the guilt that had haunted Kai for years, was a meticulously crafted lie, a cruel puppet show. The bitter taste of betrayal now had a face, a name, and a sickening purpose. The alarm blared, a raw, guttural shriek that ripped through the facility, confirming their worst fears. The antagonist knew. Security forces, an overwhelming tide of black-clad enforcers, were closing in from every angle, their heavy boots echoing ominously through the sterile corridors. Alara and Kai were cornered, trapped in the very heart of the beast they had sought to expose. But this time they weren't just fleeing. They were armed, not just with weapons, but with truth. The encrypted data drive, clutched in Kai's hand, hummed with the weight of Project Nightingale, an irrefutable testament to the agency's monstrous conspiracy. The hunted had become the holders of leverage. A grim defiance hardened their faces. This wasn't merely an escape anymore. It was a stand, a desperate, last-ditch effort to ensure the world saw the darkness they had uncovered, even if it cost them everything. The silence shattered. Muzzle flashes erupted, deafening in the enclosed space, followed by the percussive impact of rounds slamming into steel and concrete. Alara moved like a viper, her precise, calculated shots finding their marks with brutal efficiency. Kai, a protective bulwark, laid down suppressive fire, his body a shield, his mind racing to exploit every structural weakness, every blind spot. They used the facility itself as their ally. Overturned server racks became cover, narrow passages became choke points. This wasn't a clean fight. It was a desperate, brutal ballet of survival against overwhelming odds. Each impact rattled their bones. Each near miss a cold whisper of death. Blood streaked the sterile floors. Their combined training, honed through years of impossible missions, was all they had left, a desperate prayer in a hail of bullets, pushing them to the absolute limits of their endurance. The walls were closing in, their ammunition dwindling, their energy fading. The fight was unwinnable, but Kai, amidst the deafening chaos, saw it a single critical vulnerability in the facility's schematics, a daring, almost suicidal escape route. He grabbed Alara, pulling her behind a crumbling barricade, his voice urgent, strained over the gunfire. "The central conduit shaft," he rasped, pointing to a dying monitor displaying structural blueprints. "It's connected to the primary power grid. We can overload it, trigger a controlled collapse, create a vertical drop." Alara's eyes, wide with exhaustion and disbelief, met his. The plan was insane, a high-risk gamble that defied every instinct for self-preservation, a desperate plummet into the unknown. But what choice did they have? It was either this or surrendering the truth to the architects of its concealment. This was their last impossible shot. With a silent nod, a shared leap of faith, they executed the impossible. Kai triggered the overload, a deafening surge of power followed by a tremor that shook the very foundations of the facility. The central conduit shaft, their only hope, began its controlled, explosive collapse. Alara plunged first, a blur of motion, Kai right behind her, grappling onto a snapped cable, the downloaded truth secured. They plummeted, free-falling through multiple levels, a vertical nightmare amidst raining sparks, twisted metal, and concrete dust. Explosions rippled above and below them, the roar of collapsing infrastructure a symphony of destruction. The wind whipped past their faces, a momentary gasp of exhilaration mingling with raw terror. Gravity was their reluctant ally, carrying them away from the clutches of the agency. A desperate, uncontrolled plunge towards an uncertain freedom, towards the light of a world that needed to hear their story. The fall was a blur of broken concrete and desperate air, ending not in freedom, but in a vast, echoing maw beneath the city. They landed, battered and spitting dust, in a disused underground facility, a relic from an older era, its metal skeletal structures draped in cobwebs and the grime of forgotten industry. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and stale metal, a perfect tomb. Every strained breath, every rattling cough, felt amplified in the cavernous silence. This wasn't an escape. It was a carefully laid snare, a final destination orchestrated by a mind far colder than the facility's chill. From the oppressive darkness, a figure emerged, slow and deliberate, confirming the sickening truth. The mastermind was waiting, not surprised, but expectant. They had anticipated every panic turn, every desperate gambit, leading Alara and Kai directly into the heart of their own defeat, ready to finish what was started so long ago. The mastermind's voice, when it finally broke the suffocating silence, was a chilling symphony of calculated contempt. It wasn't a roar, but a calm, precise dissection of their shared pain, revealing a full, horrifying motive woven through the very fabric of their lives. They watched, impassive, as Alara and Kai reeled, taunting them with the cruel truth. There almost something, that hesitant, fragile thread of connection, of burgeoning love, wasn't an oversight. It was the target. It was the weakness ruthlessly exploited, the exquisite vulnerability leveraged to orchestrate the initial failure that tore them apart. Their unspoken feelings weren't hidden. They were observed, catalogued, and weaponized, a perfectly placed bomb under their nascent future. The antagonist took twisted delight in explaining how easily their emotional reluctance, their unresolved longing, served as the blueprint for every subsequent downfall, pulling them deeper into this elaborate, personal trap. The air crackled, heavy with the weight of revelation and betrayal, but the mastermind's twisted confession, meant to shatter them, instead forged Alara and Kai anew. A primal roar escaped Alara's throat, a coiled spring of rage and regret unleashing a blur of practiced precision and raw fury. Kai, a storm of protective instinct and self-loathing, was right behind her, their movements converging in a brutal, desperate dance. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a psychological exorcism. Each block, each strike, each breath was a confession, a silent acknowledgement of the past they shared, the love they denied. The longing glances, the unspoken promises, the almost something, all converged in this brutal ballet. They fought not as two individuals, but as one force, their shared history no longer a wound, but an impenetrable shield, a burning core of strength. The love they almost had wasn't a flaw. It was their weapon, finally acknowledged, finally unleashed, turning their vulnerability into an unstoppable torrent. The climax was a brutal, desperate maelstrom of blows and grunts, but their combined, newly acknowledged strength proved overwhelming. The mastermind, once so arrogantly superior, was finally brought down, their reign of psychological terror ending with a sickening thud against the cold concrete. With shaking, adrenaline-fueled fingers, Alara initiated the data upload, Kai's palm steadying hers, a silent pact in the face of their shared trauma. A torrent of carefully guarded secrets, encrypted truths, flowed out into the global network, exposing the conspiracy, unraveling the intricate lies for the entire world to see. The digital pulse echoed the exhaustion settling deep in their bones. The antagonist was defeated, apprehended amidst the chaos, leaving Alara and Kai profoundly spent, every muscle screaming, every nerve frayed, but victorious. The world would never be the same. And neither would they, standing in the aftermath of a truth finally set free. In the quiet aftermath, the roar of battle replaced by the mournful drip of water and the distant wail of sirens, they finally let their guard down. Wounded, bleeding, and profoundly exhausted, yet incredibly safe in each other's presence, they collapsed amidst the debris. The raw vulnerability of the moment stripped away years of unspoken words, of fear, of 1,000 almosts. Their eyes met across the grime and sweat, no longer strangers in the night, but two souls forged and bound by fire. The love they had denied, the connection they had almost started, was no longer a question, but a tangible, undeniable force, a silent scream of relief and recognition. Their shared journey through hell, through the crucible of danger and revelation, had transformed their almost into a now, a profound, unspoken confession etched into the very fabric of their being. The future, uncertain moments ago, suddenly felt clear, illuminated by their shared, unwavering gaze. Months later, the echoes of the past had softened into distant memories, replaced by the gentle rhythm of a life meticulously rebuilt. Alara and Kai were no longer shadows, forced to hide, but architects of a new existence. Far from the clandestine world that almost consumed them, they worked side by side, their hands, once trained for combat, now creating something tangible, perhaps restoring an old house, building a small, honest business, their movements imbued with an easy familiarity that spoke volumes. The quiet strength born from their trials radiated from them, an understanding woven into every glance, every shared smile, a peaceful resolution that felt earned. The scars remained, a testament to what they had overcome, a reminder of the darkness they faced, but they no longer defined them. They faced the future, together, not with grand pronouncements, but with a quiet, enduring certainty, ready to write the next chapter of their story, no longer almost something, but finally, unequivocally, everything. The alleyway air, thick with the scent of rain and despair, offered no sanctuary. The city lights blurred into a frantic halo as I stumbled, my stolen pulse rifle a cold, heavy truth in my trembling hands. Every shadow held a threat, every distant siren a confirmation of my hunted status. Then she emerged, not the clinical surgeon, but the architect of my waking nightmare, her surgical mask replaced by a chillingly composed smile. "You ran," she stated, her voice calm, almost disappointed. "We knew you would. It's in your programming." My blood ran cold. Programming? The world spun. She held up a small, metallic chip, identical to the one I'd found embedded in my own forearm after escaping. You were never meant to remember, Unit 7. Your purpose was simple: retrieval. Your memories, your identity, they were a contingency, erased for optimal performance. You were a ghost until the trigger failed. The ground beneath me seemed to vanish. I wasn't just a victim. I was a weapon, a marionette with a faulty string. But the trigger didn't fail, I rasped, raising the rifle, my heart a lead weight. You made me remember. You brought me back. Her smile faltered. The cold, analytical glint in her eyes morphed into something akin to surprise, then fear. This wasn't just an escape. It was a rebellion, a consciousness forged in pain, refusing its designed oblivion. The rifle barked, its roar echoing through the night, a defiant crescendo against the silent hum of my shattered purpose. This was not the end of a mission. It was the birth of a war. And I, the awakened ghost, was finally choosing my own battlefield.